Welcome to the third deep dive of our Dinosaur Stories series. Today we are talking all about the Velociraptor, and we're going to start with a scene that sounds, well, it sounds completely made up, but I promise you it's real.
Oh, it is one of the most incredible things ever found in the dirt.
Right. So picture this. It's 1971, and this team of Polish and Mongolian paleontologists are digging out in the harsh, really arid sand dunes of the Gobi Desert,
Yeah, brutal conditions out there.
and they brush away the earth to reveal what essentially looks like a freeze frame of a prehistoric murder.
That is literally the best way to describe it.
It's a perfectly preserved fossil of this knee-high, totally feathered predator. It's got a broken arm, and its foot-long claw is just buried deep in the throat of an herbivore. They're entombed forever, like right in the middle of this desperate struggle.
And like you said, this isn't a scene from a Hollywood movie. This is the actual historical reality of one of the most misunderstood creatures to ever exist.
Exactly. So our mission for today's deep dive is to completely dismantle the pop culture myth of the Velociraptor and, rebuild the actual animal from the fossil lab.
And the contrast between that cinematic monster we all know and the actual biological reality, I mean, it is just staggering. We are looking at an incredibly diverse stack of sources for you today.
We really are.
We've got peer-reviewed paleontology journals like Nature and Science. We're looking at deep dive biomechanical models of dinosaur tendons. We even have direct insights from Reddit AMAs with legendary paleontologists like Dr. Robert Baker and Matthew Mossbrucker.
Yeah. So our goal today is to unlearn everything that a certain multi-billion-dollar movie franchise taught us.
Right, the giant scaly pack hunters.
Exactly. Because once we sift through all this data, the real Velociraptor is vastly different.
Oh.
But honestly, it's actually a beautifully complex and frankly far more horrifying survivor than the movie showed us.
Oh, absolutely.
But to understand the real animal, I feel like we first have to address the giant 6-foot elephant in the room, the identity theft. How did Hollywood get this so fundamentally wrong?
Well, it all comes down to this very specific and highly controversial taxonomic decision that happened back in the late 1980s.
Okay.
So when Michael Crichton was writing his famous novel, he relied really heavily on this book called Predatory Dinosaurs of the World. It was written by Gregory S. Paul and published in 1988.
Right, I've heard of that one.
Yeah. So in that book, Paul looked at a much larger North American dinosaur called Deinonychus. Now, Deinonychus stood about 6 feet tall and lived around 115 million years ago.
So a completely different time and continent.
Exactly. But Paul noticed that the skeletal structures, specifically like the proportions of the skull and the pelvic bones, they were strikingly similar to the Asian Velociraptor, which lived much later, roughly 70 million years ago.
Okay, so they look somewhat similar underneath.
Right. And because of those morphological similarities, Paul made this rogue decision to just lump Deinonychus entirely into the Velociraptor genus.
Wait, so Crichton just ignores the rest of the scientific community, who I assume kept them totally separate, and just runs with this one guy's theory?
Pretty much. And Crichton was entirely aware of the discrepancy. He actually admitted later to John Ostrom, who was the paleontologist that originally discovered Deinonychus, that he used the name Velociraptor simply because it sounded more dramatic.
I mean, Swift Thief does have a distinctly menacing ring to it.
It really does. It looks great on a page.
Okay, let's unpack this. This is basically like casting a Great Dane to play a Chihuahua, just because the Chihuahua's name looks cooler on the movie poster.
That is a perfect analogy, actually.
Right, because we are talking about fundamentally different animals.
Right.
So if the real Velociraptor mongoliensis wasn't this 200-pound giant, what were its true physical dimensions?
An adult Velociraptor was surprisingly modest in size. Think of a wild turkey or a medium-sized dog, like a coyote.
A coyote, wow.
Yeah. From its snout to the very tip of its stiffened tail, it only measured about 1.5 to 2 meters long. But the crucial measurement is really its height.
Right, how tall was it?
It only stood about half a meter, so roughly 2 feet tall at the hip. That is barely knee-high to an adult human.
Wow. And a knee-high predator is going to weigh, what, maybe 30 or 40 pounds?
Around 15 kilograms, yeah. Roughly 30-something pounds. All of its mass was optimized for this very specific lifestyle in the late Cretaceous Gobi Desert.
Which was not exactly a lush jungle.
Not at all. The Jodocta Formation, where we find their fossils, was a brutal, arid environment, just shifting sand dunes and extreme temperature fluctuations. To survive there, you don't need massive bulk. You need a lightweight, highly agile frame built for bursts of speed.
Which brings us to the other massive departure from the pop culture image.
Yeah.
So we shrink it from a giant to a knee-high desert runner.
Yeah.
But we also have to totally change its wardrobe, right?
Oh, yes. The scales have to go.
Right, we're moving from reptilian scales to a full coat of feathers. And for a long time, this was just an educated guess based on evolutionary family trees, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Paleontologists strongly suspected they were feathered because older, closely related dromaeosaurs found in China, like the Sinornithosaurus, had clear feather impressions preserved in the rock.
But the Gobi Desert wasn't great at preserving that stuff.
Exactly. The coarse sand there is terrible for preserving delicate, soft tissues like feathers. So it wasn't until 2007 that we got undeniable physical proof on a velociraptor itself.
Oh, the famous quill knobs discovery.
Yes.
So a team, including Mark Norell and Alan Turner, found something highly specific on a forearm bone in Mongolia. What exactly are quill knobs?
So they examined this well-preserved ulna, the forearm bone, and they found 6 distinct bumps spaced evenly along the trailing edge. Those bumps are quill knobs.
Okay, and what do they do?
Biomechanically, these are the exact anchor points where ligaments attach large pennaceous flight feathers directly to the bone. You only see these in modern birds that have fully developed wings.
That is wild.
Yeah, and the researchers calculated that this specific velociraptor would have had 14 secondary feathers on its forearm.
Hold on, so you're telling me a 30-pound animal had fully developed bird-like wings, but clearly couldn't fly?
Right, completely grounded.
If it's grounded, how do those wings not just completely get in the way? What is the biological point of having them?
Well, evolution is incredibly resourceful at, repurposing traits. Those wings served a multitude of critical functions that had absolutely nothing to do with powered flight.
Okay, like what?
The primary one was insulation. We know from bone histology and growth rings that these animals were highly active and likely warm-blooded. And the Gobi Desert gets freezing cold at night.
Right.
So a dense covering of feathers traps a layer of warm air against the body, keeping that high metabolism running.
So it's essentially wearing a down jacket to survive the desert nights.
Exactly.
But that doesn't fully explain the long wing feathers on the arms, does it?
No, those come into play for reproduction and survival. Similar to modern ostriches, they likely use those large wing feathers for elaborate mating displays or, to intimidate rivals.
Makes sense.
And furthermore, we have fossils of closely related oviraptorosaurs preserved sitting right on their nests. They were using those exact types of feathered arms to form a canopy over their eggs.
Oh, to shield them from the sun?
Yes, shielding them from the scorching sun or the freezing sand. It's a behavior called brooding.
I can visualize that perfectly.
Yeah.
But there's an aerodynamic function to those wings as well, right? Even for a flightless runner.
Oh, the biomechanics of their sprinting are fascinating. When a velociraptor was running at top speed, which biomechanical models estimate at around 40 kilometers per hour, or roughly 25 miles per hour.
Fast for a little guy.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Those wings acted almost exactly like the spoiler on a Formula One race car.
Boy, really?
Yeah. By angling their feathered arms, they could generate negative lift, pushing their lightweight bodies down into the dirt.
Oh, to get better grip.
Exactly. That increased traction allowed them to execute these impossibly sharp high-speed turns while chasing erratic prey across the shifting sands.
Wait, if it's using feathered wings as spoilers to make hairpin turns at 25 miles per hour in the dirt, how is it not just totally tumbling over?
Right. It takes a lot of coordination.
Its brain has to be wired for that kind of extreme physical processing. Now, the movies told us they had primate-level intelligence, that they were, opening doors and setting complex traps.
Yeah, that cinematic hyperintelligence is pure fiction.
Oh, man.
I know, sorry to burst the bubble. Paleontologists measure intelligence using the encephalization quotient, or EQ, which compares brain volume to overall body mass.
Okay, and how did it score?
Well, Velociraptor did have a high EQ compared to massive herbivores like a Brachiosaurus, but relative to modern animals, its intelligence was comparable to a dog, a cat, or maybe an opossum.
So it wasn't solving complex puzzles.
No.
And what about the highly coordinated pack hunting? The whole Raptor 1 distracts you while Raptor 2 attacks from the side routine.
Yeah, the fossil record simply doesn't support that for Velociraptor. The fossils we recover in Mongolia are overwhelmingly isolated individuals.
Just alone.
Yeah. If they were living and hunting in tight-knit, cooperative packs like modern wolves, we would expect to occasionally find bone beds with multiple individuals buried together, and we just don't.
So they were solo acts?
The consensus among paleontologists is that they were highly likely solitary hunters.
So we're looking at a solitary, hyper-agile desert predator.
Yeah.
not a squad of raptors calling audibles.
Right.
But this is where the real science is actually much cooler than the fiction. Because if we strip away the human-level intelligence, we uncover its real superpowers. And they are entirely sensory.
The data on this is just incredible. Researchers utilized high-resolution tomographic scans, essentially really advanced CT scans, on an exceptionally well-preserved Velociraptor brain case.
Okay.
It's known as specimen MPCD 1076. By mapping the empty cavity where the brain used to be, they created an endocast, which is a 3D model of its neuroanatomy.
And what did that show?
That model revealed hypertrophied cerebellar flocculi.
Whoa, okay. Hypertrophied cerebellar flocculi. For those of us who don't read neuroanatomy textbooks for fun, what does that actually mean for the animal out in the sand?
Fair question. So the flocculi are specific lobes in the brain that govern the vestibulo-ocular and vestibulocoelic reflexes.
Okay.
Essentially, they process data from the inner ear to control the muscles of the eye and the neck. When an animal has enlarged or hypertrophied flocculi, its brain is dedicating massive processing power to gaze stabilization.
Gaze stabilization.
Yeah. Think of how a modern chicken can keep its head perfectly still in midair while you move its body all around.
Oh, so while this animal is sprinting over uneven dunes, making these violent spoiler-assisted turns, its head remains perfectly level. Its eyes are completely locked onto the prey.
Exactly. It's a biological Steadicam.
That's wild.
A deadly accurate Steadicam. And it wasn't just tracking by sight either. Those same CT scans analyzed the elongated cochlear duct in its inner ear. The length of that duct correlates directly to hearing capabilities.
And it had good hearing.
Incredible hearing. It revealed that Velociraptor could perceive a massive spectrum of sound frequencies, specifically peaking between 2,368 and 3,965 hertz.
So it could hear, like, the faintest scuttling of a lizard.
Or the breathing of a mammal hidden deep in the brush.
So it's this hyper-aware, highly tuned tracking machine. Which brings us to the kill. With this biological Steadicam and super hearing, how does a solitary 30-pound predator actually take down its prey? We really have to tackle the sickle claw.
Ah, the famous claw.
Yeah. In the cultural zeitgeist, that enlarged curved claw on the second toe is basically a switchblade. The raptor jumps on a victim and slashes downwards, just disemboweling them.
Well, modern biomechanical studies have completely dismantled the slashing myth.
Totally dismantled it.
Totally. Researchers created 3D mathematical models of the claw, analyzing the stress distribution, the tendon attachments, and the keratin sheath that would have covered the bone. And the structural engineering of that claw means it was simply not built for slashing.
Because it would break.
Exactly. The inner curve was way too thin, and it wasn't consistently sharp enough along the inside edge to cleanly slice through thick, leathery dinosaur hide.
So it would just get stuck.
Right. If a velociraptor tried to slash a large animal, the claw would likely snag on the tough hide or strike a bone, and the resulting lateral torsion, the twisting force, would just snap the claw right off. It could not generate the necessary cutting force.
So what is the evolutionary point of evolving a 2.5-inch hook blade on your foot and like holding it off the ground to keep the point razor sharp if you can't even slash with it?
We actually find the answer by looking at modern birds of prey. Paleontologist Denver Fowler and his colleagues introduced what is now the leading paradigm. It's called the Raptor Prey Restraint Model, or RPR.
Okay, the RPR model. How does this actually play out in a hunt?
A velociraptor hunted almost exactly like a modern golden eagle. Yeah. It would ambush its quarry, leap entirely onto the victim's back, and use its own body weight to pin the animal to the ground. Then it deploys the sickle claws.
Okay, but not to slash.
Right. Instead of slicing, it drives those razor-sharp points straight down, puncturing deep into the neck or the soft tissues.
Hold on. You're telling me a 30-pound animal jumps onto a thrashing, fighting dinosaur and just tries to ride it out? How does it not just get violently thrown off or crushed against a rock?
Well, the sickle claws act like a mountain climber's crampons.
Oh!
Yeah, once those claws are sunk deep into the prey, they create an unbreakable anchor. As the prey thrashes, the velociraptor uses its stiffened tail as a counterbalance, and it violently flaps those feathered wings we talked about earlier.
All right, to push itself down.
Exactly. By flapping, it continuously forces its body weight down, maintaining perfect dynamic balance right on top of the struggling victim.
That is, wow. So instead of a swordsman slashing with a blade, it's more like a mountain climber digging their ice axes into the prey,
Whoa.
using its feathered arms to balance like a tightrope walker.
That's a great way to picture it.
But its jaws aren't built like a T-Rex, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have the bone-crushing bite force to instantly snap a neck. So how does the prey actually die?
Honestly, the sheer trauma of the puncture wounds does most of the work.
Yikes.
But because it lacked a quick killing bite, the velociraptor would simply use its recurved, serrated teeth to begin plucking and eating the prey while it was pinned down and fully alive.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The victim eventually succumbs to massive blood loss or organ failure from the claws.
That is infinitely more brutal than the movies. Just getting pinned to the sand by a 30-pound feathered nightmare and eaten alive.
It's nature at its most raw.
And the most spectacular part of all of this is that we don't just have to rely on mathematical models to know this is how they fought. The Earth literally provided us with a photograph of it happening.
Yes. This brings us right back to the fossil you mentioned at the very beginning of our dive. The fighting dinosaur specimen.
Found in 1971.
Discovered in 1971, it is arguably the most dramatic fossil ever unearthed, and it's currently a heavily guarded national treasure of Mongolia.
As it should be.
It features a fully articulated velociraptor locked in mortal combat with a protoceratops.
And just for context for everyone listening, a protoceratops is a sheep-sized herbivore. It's heavily built, with a massive, powerful beak and a bony frill protecting its neck. It's essentially a very angry, prehistoric wild boar.
That's exactly what it was like, and the physical mechanics preserved in the rock perfectly validate the RPR model we just discussed.
Really? How so?
Well, the fossil shows the velociraptor underneath the protoceratops. The raptor's left hand is desperately gripping the herbivore's face.
Okay.
But its right foot, with that legendary sickle claw, is driven incredibly deep into the throat of the protoceratops, right exactly where the carotid artery and jugular vein would be located.
Stabbing, not slashing. Anchoring itself into the vital organs, just like you said. But the herbivore clearly wasn't going down without a fight, because the fossil shows the sheer danger of this hunting method.
Oh, the protoceratops fought back viciously. Its powerful parrot-like beak is clamped completely shut around the velociraptor's right arm.
Ouch.
Yeah, the bite force was so immense that the fossil shows the raptor's arm bone is physically broken. They were completely locked together in this lethal stalemate.
But how does a chaotic fight to the death end up frozen so perfectly? I mean, predators usually don't die instantly from a broken arm.
True. The geological consensus points to the volatile nature of the Jadokta Formation. These two animals were fighting on the slopes of a massive, rain-soaked sand dune.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, their violent struggling likely destabilized the sand beneath them, causing the entire dune to suddenly collapse. They were entombed instantly, buried alive under tons of wet sand, while literally in the middle of trying to kill each other.
It's just such a haunting, perfect snapshot of history. But, looking at that broken arm really makes me wonder, was Velociraptor regularly taking on prey like a Protoceratops? Because jumping on an animal that can shatter your limbs seems like a terrible long-term survival strategy.
You're hitting on the core problem of being a lightweight predator. Taking on heavy armored prey is a massive risk. It was usually only taken out of extreme desperation or maybe youthful inexperience.
So what do they normally eat?
The vast majority of their diet consisted of much safer targets: small mammals, lizards, and the infants of larger dinosaurs. And crucially, they were opportunists. They scavenged whenever possible.
Letting someone else do the dangerous work? Smart.
Exactly. And the fossil record backs that up definitively. There was a fascinating 2012 paper published by paleontologist David Hone and his colleagues. It detailed a velociraptor fossil that contained a massive, undigested bone lodged right in its gut cavity.
Okay, what kind of bone?
They identified the bone as belonging to an Esdarchid pterosaur,
Wait.
which is a massive flying reptile with a wingspan of over 6 feet.
Okay, a 30-pound raptor is absolutely not swatting a flying reptile with a 6-foot wingspan out of the sky.
No, it would be practically impossible. The internal evidence tells a very clear story of scavenging here. The pterosaur bone in the gut showed absolutely no signs of acid pitting.
Meaning what?
Meaning the digestive juices hadn't even started to break it down yet. The raptor died almost immediately after swallowing it.
Oh, wow.
And even more telling, the skeleton of that specific velociraptor had a severely broken and only partially healed rib.
So we have an injured, likely starving predator just dragging itself through the desert. It stumbles across the massive carcass of a dead pterosaur, tears off a chunk of meat with a huge bone inside it out of pure desperation, swallows it whole, and then dies just hours later.
Exactly. It's a really grim reminder of how unforgiving the late Cretaceous ecosystem actually was.
Yeah, no kidding.
It wasn't a world of cinematic monsters easily dominating their environment. It was a brutal, daily struggle for calories in a harsh desert. And it demanded every evolutionary advantage they could muster, from insulated feathers to those gyroscopic brain lobes.
Wow. When we put all these pieces together, the story we are left with is just so much richer. Yes, we have to let go of this scaly, human-sized, door-opening monster that Crichton and Hollywood popularized.
Sadly, yes.
But by stripping away the fiction, we don't lose a terrifying predator. We gain a beautifully adapted 30-pound feathered assassin, a creature that used negative lift to corner at top speeds, balanced on thrashing prey like a demonic tightrope walker, and survived one of the harshest deserts in the ancient world.
That's spot on. And the legacy of the Velociraptor is actually still visible today, if you know what you're looking at.
Oh,
Yeah, the physical dinosaur may be buried in the Gobi Desert, but the biomechanics survived. The next time you see a hawk swoop out of the sky, pin a rabbit to the ground with its talons, and aggressively flap its wings to keep its balance while it feeds.
that's the RPR model.
Exactly. You are witnessing the exact biological echoes of the Velociraptor's hunting strategy.
The dinosaurs never really left, did they? They just traded the desert sand for the sky.
Well said.
But I want to leave you with one final image to mull over as you go about your day. We've established they were fully feathered, highly specialized relatives of modern birds. And we know from studying their throat anatomy that they absolutely did not possess the vocal cords of a mammalian lion,
Right, no roaring.
which means they couldn't roar. So imagine walking through a dark, prehistoric sand dune at night. You wouldn't hear a booming cinematic roar warning you of their presence.
Not at all.
You'd hear the true sound of a velociraptor hunting in the dark. Low, guttural hums, hisses, and the terrifying raspy squawks of a giant carnivorous bird locking onto your footsteps. Sleep well.